Good afternoon. So here is the weather forecast for the next 10 days. We're basically going from summer high of 95 degrees to a low of 39 degrees next week. So 39 degrees, that's literally 7 degrees above freezing. And next week, that's going to be middle of April. So how do tropicals adapt? You're either going to get scorched or you're either going to get frozen. There is really no in between in the Central Valley. There is one technique that is above everything else that you can do to ensure your tropicals are able to make it and not only make it but thrive in this crazy variation of weather. So I wanted to show you, just as with the warmer weather, this is what's happening with many of the tropicals. The Inga is just exploding in growth. A fun fact about the Inga I wanted to show you actually. See the nodules here? The Inga tree, being that it's native to the Amazon rainforest, gets attacked quite a bit by pests. So what it does is it actually summons ants to come and attack whatever's eating it by secreting sugar off of the nodule. So pretty cool. Sunrise papaya is waking up. Even the Coriante mango is looking awesome. This is what the heat's doing to many of the tropicals. As the temperature warms up, the metabolism of the plants essentially kick into high gears and start growing, and not only growing but also producing flowers, as you can see. Longans, Kahala variety. But yeah, so where I was going with that is the one thing that you can do to ensure your tropical trees survive and thrive in this climate really is to make sure that they are healthy. What I mean by healthy is make sure that they are well fed. That way, a better fed tree is going to be able to withstand the heat and the cold much better than one that's starving a bit. So I'm going to take you to the back where I kind of show you some of the feeding techniques that I do right around this time of the year. So I'll see you in the back. It's about 4 o'clock, and as I've mentioned before, I've got my automatic watering system kicking in for 3 minutes every hour from 8 to 5 p.m. So in addition to the trees getting fed, they are also getting a nice drink of water. So during this time of the year, during the growing months, you really want to keep the trees nice and hydrated. That is very important, particularly if that tree is producing flowers, such as these mangoes here. Let me see if I can find you some. Yeah, check it out. It's Lancetilla. Especially during the flowering seasons, this is when you want to increase the water intakes to the trees, because what happens is the second that the tree feels water stress, first things they do really is just to kind of drop the flowers, and there goes your set of fruits. So increase your water. Yeah, look at this. This guy is just wonderful looking. Even the Manila mango, no flower bracts yet, but we're just barely approaching spring. But yeah, check it out. This is an Alfonso. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting a bit distracted here. So make sure that they are fairly hydrated, and as you can see, I've got automatic waters kicking in in small doses but more frequently. So going back to feeding, there are numerous ways that you can feed a tree, and I myself practice all three of them. So 3 times out of the year, spring, summer, and fall, I provide the trees, container trees and also in-ground trees, with a nice dose of granular feeding. In my feeding approach, I aim for organic. That's in the long run, it is just so much better for the trees. I mean, it's okay if you use synthetic. The tree's not going to be able to tell the difference. The thing with the organic granular feeding though is you are having to rely on the bacteria, the microorganisms, to break it down and then therefore make the nutrients available for the tree. That process is not going to happen overnight. That process, you're talking as short as 2 weeks to several months. So it's really a long-term feeding strategy. So in addition to granular feeding, which again I do 3 times out of the year, I also do liquid feeding depending on the state of the tree. If I want the trees to grow, give them fish emulsion. If the tree is flowering or fruiting, give them something that's high in phosphorus and potassium, hence the 10-10. So this is all liquid feeding. So liquid feeding, I normally reserve this for the containerized plants, just because I mean they do leach into the nearby areas where the in-ground trees can then uptake the leftover nutrients that just slips into the ground. So I do that basically almost on a monthly basis. The next thing that so concerning liquid feeding, it's actually fairly quick. When you feed a tree to liquid feeding, which is basically that mixed in with water, the nutrients become available to the tree generally within a few days, maybe a day to 2 days. The other method that I do, which I try my best to do it every 2 weeks, but you can do it as often as you want. The reason why I aim for 2 weeks is really out of respect and courtesy to my neighbors, and that would be foliar feeding. What happens is when you foliar feed your trees using organic solutions, which mostly is fish emulsion, it really does stink up the whole neighborhood, and you do not want to be the cause of a homeowners association because your yard stinks so much. So I do that out of respect for my neighbors, really. So 2 weeks seems to be a kind of a good medium. So the process that I go about in foliar feeding is, I mean, regardless of the container that you use, I mean the sprayer that you use. In my case, because I've got so many trees, I just use this 5-gallon sprayer. Put it on the lowest setting. You almost want to kind of just miss the foliage, and the concoction that I use is basically mostly fish emulsion. I mean, this is designed for a hose feeding, but I find that it's better if you use your own dedicated sprayer. So I mean, I can just mix this in here, mix it with water. So these serve as the macro nutrients. We're talking the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. However, there are then the micronutrients, which we were talking chelated iron, chelated manganese, the additional minerals and chemicals that the trees need in small doses. In addition, if I find that a tree is a bit chaotic, chelated iron. So the secret, in addition to the macronutrients and the micronutrients, molasses, basically any form of sugar, all of this is not sugar. It's the building blocks for the trees to ensure that they are healthy. The trees, do the process of photosynthesis, creates sugar, and guess what? They also have been found to uptake sugar. So when you mix in with your nutrients, molasses, you're basically giving additional sugar, kind of a boost of energy to the trees. So, assuming the leaves on this Atamoya is able to uptake 100% of the sun's energy, well, guess what? By adding additional sugar, it now has the capability of getting in 150% of its sugar for the day. So that's a good win-win. So the foliar feeding is gonna benefit the young leaves the most. I mean, for example, these newly starting branches and leaves that are starting to shoot out, when you foliar feed this, I mean, it's going to benefit it tremendously. The leaves will be all nice and deep green, as it should be. So that's foliar feeding for you. So anyhow, yeah, I mean, I do that. I try to aim for twice a week. And the cool thing with foliar feeding is as soon as you spray onto the tree, the nutrient becomes made available to that tree fairly quickly. You're talking generally within a day. So when you supplement, so foliar feeding is supplemental. You do not want to use that as your main source of food for the trees. You want to use either granular or liquid feeding. Granular being the preferred for the long term, just because it does take them a while to break down, and as it breaks down, it slowly releases the nutrients to the trees. But foliar feeding, it's a quick. It's almost like an energy bar for a tree that just needs an extra boost. So that's how I would say it. Yeah, it generally, the nutrient generally becomes made available to the tree within a day. Liquid feeding, maybe a day to 2 days. Granular, it's going to take a while. I should mention, just going back to the synthetic granular fertilizers just a bit. Again, the plant's not going to notice any difference. A nitrogen is a nitrogen. The thing with synthetic fertilizer is that they are fairly quick to be taken up by the tree. I mean, you're talking about the same rate as liquid feeding, which would be once you granular feed a tree with synthetic fertilizer, it's generally made available to the tree within a couple of days. So anyhow, yeah, just I find that the more you feed your tree, I mean, the more resistant they can become, and over a period of forcing them to adapt to our crazy environment, I mean, as you can see, I mean, it becomes like massive size. So anyhow, yeah, that's really it. Just feed your trees. Watering is not feeding your trees. You're going to have to give them the macronutrients, and depending on the condition of the tree, also it wouldn't hurt to give them a boost of the micronutrients. So anyhow, oh, one last thing, I almost forgot. In addition to feeding your tree, you also, when it comes to the organic solutions, you're also feeding the microorganisms that are alive in your ground, which is also helping to break down organic matter and therefore making the nutrients available to your trees. So let me show you really quick. So I've got a good amount of wood chip here, and over the period of years and years, it of course breaks down. This is what is alive in my ground. a lot of organisms. So yeah, this is really what's, I mean, the poop of the worms is what's known as worm castings. And I mean, this is like just really solid goodness to the trees. So in some ways, I mean, me feeding the trees indirectly feeds the organisms that in turn then directly feeds the tree. So it's a big win-win. I mean, without the microorganisms in the ground, without the mycorrhizal fungus that's in the ground, there is virtually no chance that any of these trees, given that they are tropical trees, there's really no chance that they would be able to make it. So without your army of microorganisms, you've got to keep them happy. So anyhow, all right, have a good afternoon.